Hey everyone. So in this video we're going to be working on a piece called Leading Strike. As you can see, I have a bunch of reference up from my other piece, Rousing Speech, and the same reference I used for that. Leading Strike is similar to Rousing Speech in description, except this is in an offensive posture, whereas before she is leading, the captain in this piece is participating. The description pretty much says not much else. She's wearing the same stuff. She's equipped with the same weapons, etc. Um, I mean, I had the option of using a sunset if I wanted to be lazy and silhouette the guards instead of painting them. And I didn't go with the sunset just because it's kind of, wasn't feeling it. But as you can see now, I'm just sort of doing some sketching. You'll notice I'm using some, actually the eraser to sketch. Um, I'm not, like I said, I like to keep away from using line, but sometimes it is helpful just to help establish, hard edges and stuff like that, or even just the flow of a piece if it has, if there's lots of 3D shapes. Sometimes I like to do the ribbing, which I've talked about on other videos. So anyway, I'll be constantly flipping back to the reference in the other piece to make sure that the two look the same. This causes some problems later on in the face, as always, but I think it came out okay. So we're just doing some more sketching here. Now, the proportions of this piece are a little bit strange. I think it's 5.5 by 8, or 8.5, which is really wide. And that's difficult for this piece especially because the description says that she has a halberd raised over her head. And if you have that, then you're probably going to be better in a portrait dimension, but it has to be landscape, so that's what it's going to be. So here we go. This piece took a lot longer than my other pieces. This took about 8 hours, and that's really just because there's so much going on. You'll see as things go on. Also, and I seem to have, for some reason, changed my style again. So I used to always, or I can't say always, but for the last couple pieces, I'd do black and white sketches at first, and then I would do color, and then I'd start doing the detail in color. Now, what I've recently started to do is do everything in black and white, even the detail, and then paint it in with color. And the problem with that is that it makes it look very unfinished, so I have to go back in with multiply layers or color dodge layers and do highlights and then just more and more little detail work. And it ends up taking a very long time. I'm not sure why I changed it. I don't know, it just seems more natural to do it this way. But maybe with practice I can reduce my speed, or my time. Increase my speed, reduce my time. Alright, so this face is pretty awkward at first, but it started coming along. It was okay. Actually, there was one of the earlier faces I liked a lot, and I don't regret changing it because I liked the way the finished face came out. But if it wasn't for the fact that I wanted it to look more like her, it would have been fine. Probably just left the way it was. So lots of little face details. Faces are so important. I can't stress this enough. You also notice that her head is a little bit off kilter, and that's what I'm fixing right now. Also, one of the problems I had is that she looks very masculine, and in order to make her more feminine, I had to change her proportions. So her head was too small. It made her body look really big, which is more masculine. I had to cinch her waist a little bit and elongate her legs. Just stuff that exaggerated her feminine qualities without, giving her a G-string and a bikini top. I actually got some comments on Rousing Speech about that. Some people were saying that they wanted her to have female, or well, the person speaking was not a native English speaker, or the person commenting, and he was saying something along the lines of that he wanted her to have woman armor, or I guess my interpretation is armor that is more feminine, probably with molded breasts. And I don't mean like a low cut armor top. I mean like actual. So if you think of like Greco-Roman armor, where it shows the abdominals, the pectorals, and sometimes the obliques. Kind of like that, except with boobs instead of instead of male pecs. Um, but I don't like doing that in paintings. I'm sorry. I know people like when heroines have those boob breastplates, but those really never existed in history. Uh, so I don't know. I just feel like they're when I'm trying to do something that's a little bit more realistic, they don't really fit. If it was a completely sci-fi or total fantasy thing, maybe. But I like to draw most of my work from history and then sort of elaborate fictional parts so that it's still recognizable and has a ring of truth to it, I guess, making it more credible. But those breastplates just bother me. Also, I feel like this character is not really a very sexual character. She's sort of not that heroines can't be sexual or have sexual identities, but um, she's just sort of all business. She's a bit Spartan in nature. So I really enjoy doing hair. I really think if you're going to do hair, you should make some custom brushes because it's very hard to do otherwise. I mean, it is possible, and I do it all the time, but there are some custom brushes that just make it way easier. So you should try to make some if you can. Generally, the best way to make a hairbrush is to just kind of make like a polka dot pattern and then save it as a brush. And believe it or not, that polka dot, when it's actually swept across the canvas, will it'll kind of give strand-like appearance. It won't overly define the hairs. It'll still sort of look like clumps, which is how you should paint hair anyway. You probably should never paint hair as individual strands because then it just looks bizarre. Usually hair falls in plates or little clumps and gets brushed to the side or whatever. So keep that in mind when you're painting hair. As you can see, I'm not doing a bunch of wiry hair sticking off. I'm sort of just doing these patches. So we're still working on the face. Faces have a lot of planes to them. What I mean by that is there's a lot of different sort of angles going on in the face, and that can make it complex when you're lighting because in order to make it look realistic, they have to be lit correctly. So, the face pretty much has angles all over the place. It's spherical by nature, but there are some areas that are concave, some that are convex, some parts that you would think would be concave but are actually convex. For example, the area underneath the eyebrow, sort of outwards towards the side of the face, is actually it pillows out a little bit, so it gets a little more highlight than you'd actually would think. What I'm doing here is I'm just sort of doing the basic portraiture highlight, uh, and what that means is that there's this the light's coming in from the side or front to the side. She has a little triangle of light on her rear cheek. Um, just sort of basic stuff. I didn't and when I first did the piece, I made those little chain link things using the brush tool. I didn't bother this time. I just sort of did it by hand. Same with the I very quickly did the necklace this time. I didn't feel like we've got stuff to do. That is a rather minor part of this painting comparatively. I actually left the leather fairly unrendered. My reasoning for this is that unless it's really well lit, leather tends not to be extremely interesting. There's a lot of texture for sure in leather, but lighting wise, it's sort of bland, I guess. So and in the lighting situation that we have here, it's kind of a low light, so there really wouldn't be a need for too much of detailing on the leather. sort of big blocks with subtle lighting. This was also a tough pose to paint. I had never really attempted it. She's, sort of jumping or diving into combat while raising the halberd, and she's really overextending that arm, which is pretty intense looking. I mean, it's not usually how people would actually swing it. They'd sort of have their arm bent and be hefting it over their shoulder. In this case, she's kind of like really throwing the arm out there. So it was fun. It was a good exaggeration for sure. It put a lot of action and movement, but it's not too realistic, I don't think. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe she's describing a larger arc with her swing, but I'm not going to worry about it. So we're just doing some metal lighting here. Metal is tough, as we all know. There's a lot of stuff going on in metal. It's highly reflective. It shows its environment. It can be difficult to light. And here I go messing with the face some more. Now, I was a little bit torn about how I wanted to do the eyes. In rousing speech, the eyes were done very subtly. They almost look like they're squinting. And that's fine because I don't know, it just looks fine in that piece. But here, her face is really important. There's a lot of emotion, and the squint it just made it look like her eyes were closed. So I decided eventually to go with kind of a more wild look, which you won't be able to see yet because I'm still just doing the lighting. And for a while I did the kind of like the hint of the sclera, which is the white of the eye, but I didn't really invest too much time. Right there I was just seeing what she'd look like with a nose ring. Also, I think I gave her a beauty mark on her left side of the face. I'm not sure if that actually makes it into the final cut, but I kind of liked it. So those are her, the drawstrings around her chainmail. Kind of a neat little accessory since it's not really something you see a lot. I really nailed the rivets on the armor on this piece. I was really happy with them. They look quite authentic. And the little medallions came out way better in this one, I think, than in the other piece. In Rousing Speech, they were sort of meh. They didn't add or detract. And this one, I think they really added to the armor. They gave it a lot of character. Okay, so now let's make her more ladylike. We're going to be fixing up her musculature on the legs, elongating them, making them more feminine. She's got the thigh-high boots, which, as I mentioned in the original, or the last video, I included them because they were not only cool, but they're very characterful, and they're historically accurate. Those did exist, as you can see in my reference. But they also, actually, I bet those were men's boots, to be completely honest. But to a modern viewer, they look very feminine, because not many men wear boots that are thigh-high. It's sort of more of a superhero thing for women. Then again, most superhero women who wear, or superheroines who wear those would probably be wearing like a bikini, and that's it. But I've already talked about that at length. I'd probably get more hits if she was in a bikini, more views, but I don't know if it's worth it, worth my integrity. Seems like a slippery slope. So what we're doing now is we're just sort of detailing these belts and leather straps. I actually added a couple just because they looked awesome. That's really all I can say about that. They added a lot of motion. They made her look more interesting. She's got all this sort of stuff tied to her, and I don't even know what it is, but it looks cool. Here we go with the fur. It was easier since I knew the fur was going to be there already. When I did Rousing Speech, I was sort of designing as I went. But now that I know the fur is going to be there, I was able to plan a little bit better when I painted. Now, I'm going to do some of those gloves, if I remember correctly. Oh, no, we're changing the cape. Her cape was too Batman-like before. It's too big. Yeah, that was probably a good call. Capes are actually very difficult to wear. If you've ever seen The Incredibles, they talk about it. You can get, capes are dangerous pretty much. They're really more for show than anything else, and in combat they can be a real problem if you get snagged or someone grabs you by their cape and grabs you by the back of the cape and slits your throat, or who knows, you get snagged on a tree and you're a sitting duck type of a thing. Similarly, that's why modern soldiers shave their heads. You can't grab the hair and pull the head back and slit the throat. Actually, as a sort of interesting historical side note, the redcoats, or the British military in the Revolutionary War, American Revolutionary War, to anyone who's foreign who's watching, they used to actually braid their hair or plait their hair, and they had these long ponytails. And you'd think that would be a bad thing because someone could grab you, but remember, they're fighting in formation, so it's a little bit different. But anyway, they actually used to, I believe, tar their hair or soak it in something. And the reason was that I think it was pitch or tar. The reason was that if someone took a swing at you with a saber to the back of the neck, it could actually save your life. Your nasty gunked up ponytail could actually stop someone from cutting your head off. So, food for thought. So what we're doing now is we're saying those little straps around the gloves. They don't really do anything, they just look cool, but I guess that's a theme lately. I guess they keep our gloves on. Why not? Maybe they even add a little extra protection. They're a little, a little bit of banding to help deflect a blade or whatever. Just hinting at the chainmail, and a little bit of aerial perspective here just to differentiate the foreground or her body from her rear hand. Fixing the thumb. Man, I've painted so many hands holding weapons now. I wouldn't say it's second nature, but it comes a lot more easily now than it did a year or two ago. Adding that lovely little glyph to the axe blade. And just doing some fixing the perspective on these little ribbons. Sweet, she's starting to look good, right? Alright. Doing a little liquefy to fix things. Gotta go in. Sometimes when you use liquefy, it smudges the edges and you have to go in and fix it up, but it's worth it. Saves a lot of time otherwise. Now, I'm probably going to be doing a lot of edits here on this arm because it's a little bit too long. Her humerus here would be longer than her forearm, her tibula, and her fibula. I'm sorry, that's the leg. Her radius and the ulna, excuse me. Her radius and the ulna. So this is not going to get fixed yet. It actually was fixed way later. But for now, it looks okay. It just looks really, I guess, overextended. I actually fixed it right after the piece was done. Sometimes I finish a piece and I hate it. I look at it and I just can't stand it, and I don't want to show it to anybody, but I know I have to. So what I'll do is I'll sort of sit and percolate overnight and think about it, and then when I come back and look at it with fresh eyes in the morning, I'll say, oh, it's so clear now what's wrong, and I'll just hop on. 15 minutes later, I fix the piece and we're done. So that actually happened this morning. I didn't record that because it was really, really small stuff, but I will show you the fixed version and the original version so you get an idea of what I did. So here I'm just fixing the nose. It was kind of tough because I really wanted it to look, the face to look like it did in Rousing Speech, but it can't be a carbon copy. You know what I mean? Like people's faces look different when they're making different expressions. So in Rousing Speech, you can see I'm flipping back and seeing what's different. I'll just explain while I make the little corrections. So in Rousing Speech, she's talking, she's orating, she's passionate, but she's not roaring. In this case, she's like, she's going berserker into combat. Her eyes are open wide. She's fully extending the mouth and probably screaming. So I wanted it to look like the same character, but not look like someone photoshopped a face onto another body type of a thing. Which is tough. It's a tall order, especially when it's a fictional character and there's only one piece of reference material that you did earlier. There's I didn't do a character chart with different expressions or anything. I probably should have, but I'm not gonna lie, this was a little bit rushed. Or not rushed, but this was on a shorter time frame, and there was really no time to do that sort of. If it had been for a studio, for example, I would have been provided with ample reference material. I know because I've worked in studios. You have expression sheets and you have pose sheets. You have different isometric, T poses. So you know what every angle of the character looks like. But this was for a smaller client, which is fine. I mean, I like working with small clients, but that sort of thing wasn't really developed yet. Oh, those eyebrows gave me no end of trouble. I'm just going to take a sip of my drink. Delicious lemonade. All right. So sometimes I do this. It's kind of funny. I'll make a correction, and it's like too far. Like I went too far when I fixed it. So what I'll do is I'll drop the opacity of the correction down to like 50%, and I'll average the two that way. And I actually end up doing it quite a bit. So it's kind of funny. So what I'm doing now is I spoke to the client. I showed him the sketch, and I said, it's kind of boring if it's just her. Would you like me to put some monsters in? And he said, yes, please use any of these monsters. It's up to you. So I said, okay, cool. Now, I'd been doing dragons for this for a very long time now, and I didn't really want to do another dragon. Not that I don't like drawing dragons, but I thought it'd be nice to bring some other creatures from the game's mythology in. So I believe these guys are called blood feeders, or something along that line, and they're pretty much vampires, I guess. So that's what I chose to go with, and I was provided with reference artwork, but I kept to the spirit, but not exactly 100%. I didn't completely love the other artist's interpretation, so I figured I'd sort of put my own spin on it. And luckily the client was cool with that. But yeah, so I kind of went with like the Nosferatu look. They've got these long fingers. I mean, the original artist gave them sort of they just looked like people with pointy ears, and they had sort of really nasty, scary mouths with teeth along the sides, which is a cool idea. So I sort of kept it, or at least I paid tribute to it. What I'm doing now is I'm just defining the shape. Oh, that ear in the back was such a pain in the butt. I couldn't get the angle quite right for a while. You'll see. I'll do something and I'll go back and paint it in, do something else, and then erase it out. I do it a bunch of times. Yeah, so you can see I'm sort of doing like this nasty, mangled skin that could be teeth, rather than explicitly defining it as teeth. And he's got those big, freaky hands. And I tried giving it some webbing, but it didn't quite look right, so I had to fix that in the end. Yeah. Now that is something that you'd want to bury a halberd in. it was kind of funny because he had these little diminutive legs. It didn't look quite right, so I had to fix them up. The lighting on him was very nice. I actually, in the end, think I like the blood feeders more than the captain, which is sort of ironic because she's the center figure of the piece, but what are you gonna do? So I had an idea that it was gonna be winter at this point, and that the blood feeder, or maybe not even winter, but just the blood feeder was gonna be kind of breathing out this little fog. Oh, so I gave him Batman eyes for a second, and it didn't look quite right. I always have this problem when I draw monsters where I can't decide how wild and savage I want them to look. And I ran into this problem on Ash Eater, if you've seen that video, where there's sort of different types of eye shapes. So like zombies have like the wide open eyes generally, and they're sort of brainless. And I like the idea that some creatures are brainless and they're sort of just living off instinct, and they've got these sort of just kind of wide open eyes. Um, and then there's other kind of creatures where it's like they're malevolent and they know exactly what they're doing, and they've got kind of the squinty, thinking about it eye. And for these guys, I ended up going with sort of the more wide open, just brains, or in this case, blood look. So what I'm doing now is adding a guy in the foreground, just to add some depth to the piece and help fill in the canvas. And I really like him. I thought he was really cool looking. Even though there's so little of him showing, he just looks really scary. Little fixes here and there. A lot of little fixes. I feel like when I paint, what I usually do is I just sort of like spill a giant blotch of one tone, and then I go in and kind of fix it. And that's how I paint. So actually, what was really amazing about this piece to me anyway, and what I'm most proud of, is just how fast I was able to get all these hands done. There are many, many hands in many different positions in this piece, and I'm really proud of the fact that they all come off looking really natural, or supernatural, I guess, but you know what I mean. Like they look real. They look like good hands. They've got good geometry and anatomy going on. So I was really happy with that. So here I'm just adding more baddies. I didn't want it to be just 2 or 3 or 4. I kind of wanted it to be a little bit of a battle. And the reason that the guys in the background are not facing the captain is because there will be other people behind the captain who she is leading, since this is leading strike. And this guy's going to be facing more towards the captain. I also kind of like the little, I know it's really cliche, little pinpoints of red eyes in the dark, but it so worked for this piece. There's just, I don't know, they're kind of disturbing. If I could redo this piece, I think I'd want it to have more of like a London feel, sort of like a fog on the river, but it's too late. So what I just did really quickly there was I added hair. These guys are not hairless, I guess, but I didn't want them to be like werewolves, so I just sort of gave them little patches of hair on their head and shoulders. So for the guards, the blood feeders are fairly simple in design. They're pretty much just naked people with big scary fingers and faces. But the guards have a lot of crap on them. They've got armor, and they've got clothing, and they've got different types of armor and different types of clothing. They've got skin, they've got helmets, they've got weapons. So I ended up just going with the silhouette warriors because they convey the point. There's people behind her. They're coming out of the fog, so you can't see all their details. So why not? It works fine. If there's one thing I could have changed, I probably would have gone back and maybe added some more atmospheric perspective on them just so that they looked more three-dimensional instead of being cardboard cutouts. But this piece was taking long enough as it was. As I said, this piece took over 8 hours. And here I'm adding a cliche moon because there's a big empty spot. But don't worry, I didn't leave it just as a big circle. I ended up doing, some Gaussian blurs, and I added some cloud cover to make it interesting. And oh, I love this guy. This is my favorite soldier, the one in the back. So yeah, he's just got such a cool pose. He's just ready for whatever's coming. I love him. The other guys are sort of just like hop, 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 just sort of walking forward, don't know what's going on. But that guy, he knows what's up. I gave a little interesting detail of like hollowing out the spear just to break up the silhouettes. The reference artwork of the Blood Feeder had a big tree, which is what I'm painting in now. And I just sort of thought it helped tie the pieces together a little bit. Plus, it was really cool. I'm using some custom tree brushes here. I did not make these. I don't take credit for that. And I tend not to use them very often. You have to be very careful when you use them because everybody uses them and they tend to look alike. And people say, "Oh, well, that's a Photoshop brush. Congratulations, you know how to download brushes offline and plug them in." And so yeah, don't use custom brushes too much. Otherwise, people are probably not going to respect you too much. I find the best techniques in Photoshop are the ones that people don't know how you did. So if you're going to use a render or you're going to use a custom brush, just be careful that it doesn't stand out. People say, he obviously just used a custom brush or just threw a reticulation or poster edges or something. If it might fool the layman viewer, but other artists are going to know. And I'm sure if people look at enough artwork, they'll figure it out. So use them as tools, not the end game. Okay, so I had some little splishy splashies for she stepped in the ground or snow or it's wet. I don't know, but it looks good. Time for the coloring. So I went with a very bluish green. I wanted this to be supernatural, and this bluish green color was in the reference artwork, so I said, why not? One thing about this was everything I colored had to be shifted using a hue saturation slider anywhere between 35 and 65 points to the right, just so it was more blue. The reason for this is because it's a night scene, things are more blue at night. The fire is, in this case, actually green, but it looks yellowish orange. Her hair, this is the natural tone. It will get shifted in a second, and you'll see why, because it looks like a fireball right now. Or it looks way more red than it should. Oh, those stupid branch tips. So I love that brush that I used for the branches, but it has very pixelated tips, and I actually had to go back today and fix them because they were standing out and bothering me. So anyway, doing coloring now. Everything is actually way more green and blue than it appears to be, just because the ambient color is blue and green. You can actually look if you look at my color. Sometimes it will show on the left side. You'll see the colors I'm using are actually green. So the pants and stuff are actually being painted green, but because they're more yellow orange on the spectrum, they appear yellow orange. All right, and the armor I just left as blue-green because it's reflecting its environment. So that's brown. And watch, I'm going to use the slider in a second once it's colored. Bam! Now it looks, well, sorry. It was being painted brown, but it looked red. Now it looks brown. And I actually ended up, I think, toning it down a little bit. Painting the iron, boom, slid over. Doesn't even look like it anymore. Alright, so what I'm doing now is I'm doing the little facial details with multiply layers. What I mean is I'm doing, The areas around the eyes are purple blue. The cheeks and nose are usually red. The forehead's yellow. The chin area is generally blue. The lips are purple red, etc. The only problem with that is that she looked like a killer clown. So I had to tone everything down. So the way I painted these guys was I choose the color that they would be if they were in daylight, and then I shifted over 35 to 65 degrees on the saturation, plus 35, 65, and that makes them match the rest of the piece. It's pretty sneaky. Lots of little knuckles and fingers to color. And then with each distance, every couple feet that they're falling away into the background, you've got to make it more green and less saturated so that it goes with, the aerial perspective, which in this case is green and rather than sky blue. Bam! So that was red. Still looks red, but it's actually orange now. Oh, this was fun. I started doing highlights, and once you start, you just can't stop. So I started doing highlights, and the more highlights I did, the better it looked, so then I kept doing highlights, and that took a while, since there's a lot of stuff to be highlighted. What I really like doing too is kind of adding that glow, that like sheen coming off the highlighted objects, bouncing off the particles in the air around them. I love that. I have yet to actually see a full moon this bright. This is pretty crazy bright, but whatever. It's magic. So here we go. Oh, sometimes I do that. I'll hit the wrong hotkey and I'll move. I'll press V instead of B or N or something. My hotkeys are V for the move tool, B for brush, N for eraser. I don't like E because it's too far away, so I just keep my finger on those three buttons. Now the problem is I can't always see what I'm doing, and my fingers sometimes stray, so I'll hit the wrong button, and instead of painting the piece, I'll end up moving the piece, which can be bad. Here we go, doing some highlights on the armor. I really like this because they sort of had a spectral look to them. I mean, they're not supposed to be ghost soldiers, but they sort of look like them, which is okay. I mean, they're just bodies. They're not really individuals anyway. Oh yeah, painting the badass guy in the back. He's so cool. I should do more poses like that. There's one piece. I know I've been talking about him a lot lately, but Craig Mullins did this one piece. It's I think it's a conquistador in the jungles of South America or something. And anyway, it's a knight in plate mail, and he's highlighted with green, and it looks so cool. I sort of had that, and I didn't use it as reference, but I was inspired a little bit like by that when I was doing the highlighting here. Um, Also, I think he worked on the movie. There's a movie called Excalibur from the late '80s, early '90s. I think it's late '80s. I think it's like '87. Um, so it came out the year I was born then. But anyway, it's about King Arthur and the sword Excalibur and the Knights of the Round Table, etc., etc. You know the story. Well, anyway, all the scenes with Excalibur, they had an extremely bright green light and very saturated green light. So all the plate armor would have this like really green, intense highlight, and I just love that. So I like to bring in little cinematic references in my pieces sometimes. Not so people are like, oh, he's clearly referencing this movie, but just because someone put a lot of thought into that, and I think you can get a little bit of use out of somebody else's idea, not copying it, but you know, it's just a cool look. That's what I'm trying to say. plus. In this case, it actually makes sense since it's a green moon. So here I intended originally to do subsurface scattering with this brush, this color dodge layer, excuse me, but in the end it sort of just became a bounce light, or sort of as I feel it is necessary. Yeah, you can see I even labeled it subsurface, but it doesn't really stay subsurface very long. I ended up renaming it Highlight 4 because I realized this is not a subsurface scattering layer at all. What I did here was I brought the face out a little bit, made it a little brighter because it was way too dark, and then I fixed her eyes because they looked like gemstones rather than eyes. Her eyes were way too intense, super intense, so they are going to be fixed in a second. Doing some little details and textures on these guys. I tried doing like that glint effect that you see in movies sometimes. Some good examples are the new Star Trek movie, or and by new I mean the reboot, or Clash of the Titans, which I hate to reference because I hated that movie, the remake. They did it a lot on the divine armor. It's just really like has that really intense sort of highlight that goes horizontally across the screen, but it didn't end up working too well. Now, sometimes I do this in paintings. I'll try to do motion blur or stuff, and it just never ends up working. I always end up deleting it. I felt like the piece was not really contrasted enough in terms of color. There was a nice yellow light from the torches and the blue green of the moon, but it just wasn't enough. So I ended up just throwing some splashes of pink and red in there. It just felt right. It's kind of funny because it looks a little bit like an argon flare or something, but it looks cool. While I'm just painting this stuff, I think I was looking at these the eyes of the blood feeders, and I think, in my opinion, the best scary red eyes I've ever seen were in the Rammstein music video. I think it's Du riechst so good. I think is the name of the song. Oh, so I just did there is I did a little bit of that kind of intense fake highlights, and I looked good, so I kept them. I toned them down a little bit, but they stayed. If you haven't checked out that video and you're old enough to go watch it, you should check it out. If you don't like the music, just mute it. But you should look at the eyes. They looked really low tech, but they looked really good. They're kind of just like these little red flickery things. So that's it for the painting. Right now I'm going to show you the finished piece, and then I'm going to transition to the corrected piece, and you'll see there are some slight changes. The biggest and most obvious change is the saturation. I toned it down a little bit. I thought it was too saturated, but in addition to that, I sort of touched up the captain's body. I ended up blurring some of the details and fixing up some of the brush work that was too obvious, and there's just little tweaks here and there. But anyway, check it out. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you enjoyed the piece now that's finished. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them. I will answer them. I appreciate them as well. And if you enjoyed this, make sure to share it to your friends or subscribe to my channel. I'll have more work soon. I have 2 more pieces for this client, and then I'm going to do some personal pieces if I ever get the chance. But thanks again for coming by. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you soon.